We got here last night on the heels of Hurricane Sally. We actually drove through kind of the remnants of the rain. They were supposed to hit Charlotte and Davidson, but they missed kind of the east, and so we ended up driving through them. So we are here at Carolina Beach, just southeast of Wilmington. When we got here, it was still raining pretty hard and breezy, with some lightning, and but it was fine overall. Nice thing is, since the storm was kind of to the north of us at Virginia Beach, it was pulling a lot of warm air up the coast, and so it was really warm when we got here. It was almost 80 at 10 o'clock last night when we went to bed. And so today it was nice. We got some sun in the morning, and we went and played in the water. And I took a bunch of clips of waves. There were nice waves kind of associated with the storm. And the great thing was, since we're south of the storm, air was coming up the coast, as I said, but also off the land, and so it was nice big swells without having all the chop that you get when the wind is off the water. So it's changed since then. The wind's now out of the north. It rained a little bit. It's gotten a fair amount colder, but we're making the best of it here. So at some point I'm going to take a bike ride around and take a bunch of clips of kind of parts of the area. And I have a bunch of clips both from the storm last night with the wind, and also some stuff from the waves this morning when it was still sunny out. So, all right, let's see. So it's a pretty interesting day actually for looking at waves, because the wind was off the land, so it wasn't very choppy, but the remnant swell from Hurricane Sally passing through was really strong, and so these waves don't look like a lot, but they were actually really powerful. And I spent a lot of my life at the beach, and I don't usually get knocked around. If you go back to that last clip, you can actually see that I mistime my run into the water and get hit pretty hard. So we're going to look at plunging waves first, and the way that plunging waves work is that the bottom of the wave is actually dragging on the bottom of the water, and that surges the top forward, and so you get this kind of tube that you think of so stereotypically. And so I spent a fair amount of time kind of diving into these waves and then slowing down the video later so you can really see how those tubes work, right? So think of it as friction along the bottom slows down the bottom of the wave. And since the top of the wave doesn't have that same friction problem, since it's up in the atmosphere, it can kind of surge forward and go faster. And as it does, it really spills forward here, or plunges forward. So the other types of waves that are really common are called spilling waves. And spilling waves, like this one that comes at you, never gets that tube formed. And those spilling waves, what happens is the water is getting shallower much more slowly. So instead of getting that friction on the bottom and piling up vertically, they're just slowing down all at once, and they kind of very slowly come forward. And so that one that right there was kind of half plunging, half spilling. And then the last thing I wanted to show you, I wanted to think more about what these waves do right at the beach face and the way that they move sand and sediment around. So this is a pretty powerful day. It doesn't really look like it. And yet at the very forefront, right, sand is kind of just barely moving and things are getting pushed around. And you can really see from this angle the way that sediment's getting shifted around. So it's a moody afternoon on the beach, but it's not so bad here. We got a little bit of mist in the air. The ocean looks fine. I think we may be in this weird situation where the water is warmer than the air is, because the Gulf Stream comes up through here, and I think the water is 82 or 83 degrees, and the air is kind of in the mid-70s. So that would also account for a lot of this fogginess we're seeing here. I wanted to stop here. So my family's back down on the beach for trying to tough it out for a little bit more, get some kite flying done. But I wanted to point this spot out because we're on one of these dune boardwalk crossovers. And the whole point point of these dune boardwalk crossovers is to start to preserve these dunes that are sitting right behind me, right? Because those dunes are the protection for all these buildings, the natural protection for all these buildings. So in places where this is done fairly well, like here, we have a pretty decent dune, right? And that dune can serve to protect town and the road and some of that stuff. Now, that's all in the context of very short term, right? Because we know that these islands are all trying to move in. And one I'm on right now is called Pleasure Island. It's actually a peninsula that's been cut by a human canal, so it is an island now. But it's trying to move inland still, and that's useful to think about. But at least in the short term, these structures are done pretty well. But in the long term, they're going to cause nothing but problems. So as it rains more and more, I'm going to go hang out with my family, and then we'll check back in. All right, so today's a bit of a different story here. It's turned a bit colder. The wind's coming out of the north, which is driving cold temperatures down from the north, and so it's very windy, but also the wind just has like a little cold bite to it, so people are sticking it out here on the beach, so plenty of people around. They're kind of making the best we can. I'm kind of hiding here in the dune a little bit so I can get some audio, so I can talk to you guys a little bit. So basically, we haven't talked a ton about dunes and aeolian processes in this class, but it's just a good day for it. There's all this sand blowing all over the place, so I figured I'd kind of jump in here and show you some of those processes. So obviously the dunes themselves are collecting a fair amount of that sand, and they create a little barrier. And as they create that barrier to the wind, they'll collect more sand on the backside of them. And you'll see similar things out on the beachfront as well. So the other thing, I think we'll look at some ripples maybe, and we'll look at some places where there's a fair amount of sand collecting in places where things are just kind of 5% protected from the wind. So poke around and look at a few of those. Otherwise, I'll show you some scenes here real quick, and then we'll look around. Sounds good? Let's see. So I thought this was a useful part here because we had this real hard packed sand. It was cold out, things weren't drying. And the nice thing is we had wind coming directly down the beach from the north. And so what we saw in here was a whole bunch of sand that was just kind of blowing along. We call this saltating as they dust along. And I thought this kind of low camera angle would look good. So here you go. This is a real short clip here. I was trying to get a time lapse of these ripples migrating, but it was very gusty, so they would migrate a lot and then they wouldn't migrate much at all. And then kind of for the last clip here, as I was walking out, I noticed all this black sand, and I used to work with this. This is called magnetite. And magnetite is a little more dense. It's iron bearing, and so it tends to get left behind when everything else blows away. And it also tends to be a little bit finer, so when it's wet, it kind of sticks to itself. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to show you a little bit of this. More videos coming.